they're displaced from that area, they have almost like a homing instinct where they will turn around and try to go back to it. If they can't find a way back, they'll try their best to make do with a new environment, a new habitat. But the problem with that is a lot of times they can get confused, easily stressed out, and they can starve to death or even die of thirst if they can't find any food or water. Females usually prefer a specific nesting site that they'll come to every year to lay their eggs. Females can also store the male's spermatophore for 2 years, up to 1 to 2 years. So they can mate 1 year and store the sperm for 2 years until they're ready to actually lay eggs. I've had years where they've mated and nothing has happened. So until a couple years later. Actually, this year is one of those years. So she may be pregnant. So, the male turtles, they're dimorphic, which means you can tell males apart from females pretty easily. This is a juvenile male turtle, so he doesn't have his fellowship, but he is becoming sexually mature. He actually showed some interest in this girl the other day. But male turtles, when they're fully mature, they'll have the same coloration, they'll have bright red eyes. And the big difference, though, is the bottom of the shell. What's the difference between the bottom of her shell and the bottom of his shell? He's got a dip in the bottom right here, and she has a flatter bottom. And this dip in the bottom, without me having to explain too far, is to assist the male in reproduction whenever he is not being female. And because it's very difficult, actually, and this is a true statement, it's very difficult for turtles to reproduce because the shell does kind of get in the way. So they have evolved in such a way that they're able to become a matching pair and almost fit together like 2 spoons in a dishwasher. So, just to use that as a basic concept. This is Dimitri. He's about 5 years old. They generally mature around 3 to 4 years, and they'll start getting their adult colors in during that time. Right now, he still has his baby brown color, but that's starting to change. It's starting to become a little more yellow, and as he matures, he'll become more dark in color. He was hatched out by a rescue, but he is also our most costly vet bill that we ever had. Occasionally, reptiles will develop what we call a prolapse in their cloaca. For those of you who don't know, the cloaca is the other business and the reproductive and waste management end of the reptile. And they also store their, like I said, they store their reproductive organs in there. Occasionally, there is there's I like to call it an anomaly that happens called a prolapse, where they will, for some reason or other, when they're doing their business, actually pop their entire inside of their cloaca out. And in the wild, that can be kind of dangerous because if they can't suck that back in, they can get infected and later on die. Usually when that happens, the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and assist the reptile in putting it back in. Well, he was in an outdoor enclosure, and when we found him, he had already run over a stick and lacerated it. So we rushed him to an emergency vet visit down at Gibsonia at All Pet Animal Hospital, and they were able to stitch him up, suture him up, and save his reproductive organs, so he's still a viable breeding male, which we're hoping that will occur within the next year or so. Dimitri's vet bill, though, was about $300 for an emergency vet bill, including the antibiotics. So that goes to show that when you're keeping animals, any animal whatsoever, one of the things you have to consider is care for them when they get sick, and reptiles can be very costly. By the way, box turtles, eastern box turtles, are not technically available on the pet trade. They're one of our native species, and I said they're a species of special concern, so they're not really something that you can keep as a pet. And if you find one in the wild, the best thing to do is just let it go, let it be on its way. If you see him crossing the road, help him across. I know he looks cute, but it's really important that we keep our wild turtle populations up. And by taking them in as pets and displacing them, that's one of the number one causes of the decline in the wild, next to being hit by poisons. Watch the roads. Alright, and then the last turtle species I'm going to show you before we turn it over to Elizabeth. This is not a native turtle species. He's in fact 85 pounds. He's 45 pounds of bulky weight, but this is Mr. T. spur-thighed tortoise, aka sulcata tortoise, and he is doing his business. These guys are the third largest tortoise in the world next to the Galapagos giant tortoise and the El Dorado giant tortoise. They're the largest mainland tortoise we have in the world, and they're native to Central Africa and the South Sahara regions. They're generally native to, actually, let me get two people. They're generally native to arid, dry climates. They don't require a lot of moisture. Their primary food source are grasses, and if they get too much protein or too many fruits in their diet, like this guy did with his previous owner, the shell will not turn out to be nice and smooth and bony like this. Actually, if you guys could, we're going to bring them out.
Right back up here.
The reason his shell is shaped the way it is because at a young age, he was actually malnourished. His shell should actually be a large, smooth dome on top, and this is what we call bobbling. When the shell turns out bobbled, they're either getting a deficiency in a vitamin or not enough protein, and it will cause this pyramidal shape on the scoots. Mr. T is also, we're assuming by counting the rings, almost 25 years old. These guys can live well over 80 years old in the wild. It's estimated that they can live up to even over 100. The eastern box turtle we have is also a long-lived species. They can live, the longest one ever kept in captivity was around 82 years, but we assume that box turtles can also live over 100. As long as they live stress-free, relatively stress-free lives, are given enough food and nutrients, they will grow to incredible sizes, and they will also live for a very, very long time. You can find these guys at pet stores, and you can find these guys at reptile shows, and generally when you find them, they're about the size of my hand, which isn't that big, and those are the babies. Rarely ever do people consider that they can buy something that will become massive, like an African spur-thighed tortoise or a Burmese python. The problem with him is that he cannot survive our winters, and even though we keep him in an outdoor enclosure during the summer, in order to keep him safe during the winter, we have to bring him in and put him in a basement, in an enclosure to keep him warm, and still substitute his diet with all the necessary grasses he needs to eat, also supplemented by fruits and other vitamins. It's very, unless you have the space for an animal like this, my general recommendation is do a lot of research before you plan to get something. A Russian tortoise would actually be my first choice if I was going to go ahead and get a turtle because they don't get too big. African spur-thighed tortoises, they look really cute both as babies and as adults, but the cute factor can be a dangerous thing when it comes to purchasing an animal because then you get sucked in really easily. Believe me, I know what's happening here. Any questions about turtles or tortoises in general?
Is it true there are 7 distinct different meats on a turtle?
7 distinct different meats on the turtle? I actually don't know about that because I haven't eaten turtles.
Supposedly snapping turtles, which are the ones that most people eat, they say, but it's actually one turtle, one type of meat. It's just a different
Taste.
Yeah.
Distinctive taste.
Yeah, but we don't really. But yeah, I mean, that's how it works.
Don't ask me what I would do if it was served to me in a restaurant. We'll just leave that. They're basically in the same order. They're in the same order of animals. They're different families, though. Tortoises are generally considered, for the most part, land-going species of turtles, mostly native to the eastern hemisphere, but we do have tortoise species in the western hemisphere as well. Box turtles and wood turtles that we have here in Pennsylvania are 2 of our terrestrial turtle species. We consider them to be turtles and not tortoises. It's one of those rare exceptions where, like, you have frogs and toads, where there are most toad species that are mostly land-dwelling and frogs that live close to the water, while there are frog species that are desert dwellers and toad species that are more aquatic, like the Suriname toad, or a good example would be the fireball toads. You can find them. That's where those are more aquatic species. Shows that they're still toads. So it's one of the general rules where all tortoises are turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises. Or all tortoises are turtles, but not all, right? I'm getting dyslexic. You know. He's like I said, he's about 45 pounds, and then with that enclosure there, it's like all bulky weight, so he's a good workout when it comes to lifting. All right, now for the part you've all been waiting for before we get to the really cool birds of prey that are next to us. Make sure I grab the right one first. Everybody say hi to Manners. He is a California king snake. The reason he's named Manners is because his specific breed is a banana-colored California king snake. And one of my presenters, Paige, decided to name him after banana and thought it would be really cute to call him Manners. California king snakes are native to the western United States, and an interesting thing about them, they're close relatives of our eastern milk snake that we have. They eat both warm-blooded prey and cold-blooded, and one of their favorite things to eat in the wild is other snakes that are smaller than them, which is why we're going to keep them away from anything smaller than we have here today. This guy is also immune to the venom of the western diamondback rattlesnake and most other rattlesnake species. The venom, the hemotoxins in the venom do not affect the king snake's physiology, and they do kill their prey by constriction. So what they'll do is if they grab onto a prey item, whether it be a mouse or another snake, they'll wrap around it and start crushing it down to be a more palpable size for them to swallow. They're non-venomous snakes. They're part of the colubrid family, which is what we categorize things like garter snakes, rat snakes, milk snakes into. Colubrids are one of the most common families of snakes on the planet. And this guy isn't done growing yet. They can reach lengths of about 6 feet or even more. They have to be in order to be large enough to swallow western diamondback rattlesnakes, which can get up to 5 feet in length. They will eat western diamondback rattlesnakes, so no problem. They're completely immune to the venom. In fact, actually, if we have any Massasaugas in the area, let's keep our Massasauga population up. Any questions? Question?
Are you supposed to hold him by the head?
No, I don't have to hold him by the head because he's actually very used to handling. That's actually a very good question.
I've seen a baby one before.
Most of the snakes that we have are very docile, and that does not mean that they're tame, because keep in mind, all the animals we have here today are wild animals. You can't really tame down a snake, a lizard, or a turtle. You can get them used to your handling. As I like to say, snakes have 3 modes of behavior. They have a defense mode, a feeding mode, and a none of the above mode. Right now, he's in none of the above mode because he's incredibly used to being handled and tossed around the classroom. We take these guys to elementary schools sometimes to do presentations. We only take the really friendly ones, though. That usually is a good idea. But in most accidents that happen with snake bites, or even people getting accidents with large constrictors, occur during feeding time because the snake is in its feeding mode, and the first thing on its mind is grabbing a hold of the first prey item it can get a hold of. Defense mode, if they haven't been handled enough, or if they're not used to someone coming near them, then they can still bite. All snakes have a mouth and they have teeth. Even if you find a really docile black rat snake out in the wild, if you corner it, it's very likely to try to defend itself. That doesn't mean snakes are evil. That doesn't mean snakes are out to get you. They're just doing what they were meant to do, is survive. So just because a snake's biting doesn't mean it's venomous or anything like that. Another interesting fact is that there's no such thing as a poison snake. They're all the venomous ones are venomous. Poison is something you ingest. Venom is something that is injected via